Hi everybody, welcome to Langer at the Mic. I'm Mike Langer. The start of NHL free agency is less than 48 hours away. I made a video previewing that for the Montreal Canadiens. You can check it out right over here. But Monday was the deadline for restricted free agents to be qualified, and there were a ton of names that were surprisingly allowed to walk in the open market as unrestricted free agents, including the Habs' very own Rem Pitlik. So we're going to briefly talk about that today. Here's a tweet courtesy of Priyanka Amrith at Habs in High Heels. She's a great follow, by the way. If there's any quote in any Montreal Canadiens press conference, she is on it. So give her a follow on Twitter. Habs issue qualifying offers to Kirby Dach, Nate Schnarr, Joel Teasdale, Samuel Montembeault, and Caden Primo. Josh Brook, Cale Clegg, and Rem Pitlik were not tendered offers. And also, of course, Michael Pezzetta signed a one-year contract extension, a one-way contract worth $750,000. We'll get to that in a little bit as well. Back to the RFAs, though. No surprise the Habs tendered Kirby Dach. No surprise that they tendered Caden Primo. Also Samuel Montembeault, Nate Schnarr, Joel Teasdale, more AHL type of guys. It's also no surprise that they did not tender Cale Clegg and Josh Brook, who haven't really... Cale Clegg was just more of like a seventh defenseman that was picked up on waivers this year. Of course, Josh Brook hasn't really panned out the way the Habs had hoped. But again, let's get to the big surprise. That is the fact that they did not issue a qualifying offer to Rem Pitlik. And I feel like it has nothing to do with how he performed last year. He was picked up on waivers, of course, by the Canadiens halfway through the year, and he put up 9 goals, 26 points in 46 games with the Montreal Canadiens. So why would the Canadiens just let him walk? Well, it's pretty simple, because the Canadiens are obviously fighting to stay under the cap, and they currently have 14 forwards currently in line for roster spots going into next year, and that does not include Juraj Slafkovsky nor Jesse Alonen. So just by sheer numbers game, that just doesn't work out to add Rem Pitlik to the mix. I mean, maybe he could have competed with guys like Ryan Poehling or Pezzetta for maybe one of those roster spots, but the Canadiens just have an overabundance of forwards under contract for next season right now, which again leads you to believe that Pitlik would potentially be an odd man out despite how well he played last year. The other thing is that Rem Pitlik also has arbitration rights this offseason, which could further lead to him getting overpaid. And the Montreal Canadiens, well, they can't afford to hand out another Paul Byron or Yoel Armia type of contract. So if the Habs were to pay Rem Pitlik to perhaps a deal that he would win in an arbitration case, that would not be beneficial to the Montreal Canadiens long term. It could end up being a risk if Rem Pitlik, who despite his point production, he does a lot of other important things that lead to winning, skates well, plays hard, defensively responsible, can play in several situations, is a really good complementary player. But again, if that production doesn't get maintained, then the Canadiens could be on the hook for having to pay him $2 or $3 million a season long term. And again, with the Canadiens struggling to stay under the cap, that could be a very unideal situation for them. But on the other hand, here's what I don't quite understand is, why wasn't he at least issued a tender, like a qualifying offer, not necessarily a long-term contract, but why wasn't he not issued even a qualifying offer, or why wasn't he even traded in the first place? And if cap space was an issue, then you can maybe argue that the Habs should have had a little more urgency to trade a veteran like the Jeff Petrie trade situation, or Josh Anderson, maybe even Christian Dvorak, or maybe buy someone out like Yoel Armia, maybe Paul Byron, why didn't the Habs create cap space maybe a little bit, or have the urgency to create cap space and allow themselves to perhaps retain Rem Pitlik? So that's my issue with this move, because the Canadiens could be a case of mismanaging their assets for the Montreal Canadiens. But then again, just with the reality of the salary cap barely increasing, that's why so many good restricted free agents did not get tendered by their teams. And so ultimately the Canadiens at least are fortunate that Rem Pitlik, I guess, is the best player that they are not tendering. Good production, but might not be worth the long-term contract that he will likely get in an arbitration case. Now Michael Pezzetta, again, 1 year, one-way contract. That's just a feel-good signing, if anything. And obviously he will be a lot cheaper than what Rem Pitlik will probably or would have gotten paid in an arbitration case. So that makes sense from that standpoint. And Michael Pezzetta, just a guy that plays on the fourth line, just does everything that he has to do to help the team win, and you need guys like that on your team. But like I mentioned, my only issue, I guess, with bringing back Pezzetta, I know he's a fan favorite, has awesome flow, just awesome style, so he's definitely a fan favorite. And the only issue though is with, as I mentioned, the 14 forwards that the Canadiens have under contract that will compete for 12 forward spots, again, not including Juraj Slafkovsky or Jesse Alonen. Where does Michael Pezzetta fit into that? Will he even earn a roster spot, or will he just get put on waivers next year? So that we'll have to figure out in September. But what do you think? Should the Montreal Canadiens have qualified Rem Pitlik? And what other non-qualified restricted free agents should the Canadiens maybe go after? Like perhaps goaltender Ilya Samsonov, who was let go by the Washington Capitals. Let me know in the comment section below. And as usual, hit like, hit subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Tell your friends about Langer at the Mic. Give me a follow on Instagram and Twitter at Mike Langer for both. And thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time. Go Habs, go.